Learning points from CRMD, from the work that KFOG had been doing right from 2004. Now it is nearly 20 years since we started it. And the stimulus for considering this today is the fact that we recently came out with our recent 10-year experience analyzing that. I will just go through some of the thoughts. The first thing is, I think all of us who have been involved in this have a sense of satisfaction, because about 5 years ago, we set a target of achieving MMR of 30 by 2020. And when we analyzed last year, the MMR of the year ending 31st March 2020, it was 28. That was great, and we felt very happy about it. But it was possible only with mutual support and respect among the obstetrician community. That we all have to appreciate. The obstetricians of the state, forgetting whatever difference of opinion they had, came together in this. And it was the CRMD, Confidential Review of Maternal Death, was taken as a very looked after event in the history of KFOG. And that is what made it possible. We cannot ignore the fact that to support of Government of Kerala and KFOG's leadership, which were the critical factors in achieving this. When we presented this idea in 2003 to the then Health Secretary, Sri Bharat Bhushan, and all the health secretaries subsequent to that always supported this move. And of course, the Federation, all the presidents and secretaries till now have been very supportive. And that is what made the success possible. We have to understand, and any other state which wants to consider auditing should consider these facts. The government support is critical, is crucial. And all healthcare sections have to work in cohesion. That includes Directorate of Health Services, the Director of Medical Education, the medical colleges, all hospitals under the DHS, and all private hospitals. And to unite all of them, we had the Kerala Federation. That is why this was possible. Now, the one thing that we realized, in fact, in early 2000, is that it is not enough to identify the cause of death. We have to work out solutions which are practical in our own setting. In fact, WHO came out with this acronym, MDSR, Maternal Death Surveillance and Response to it. By surveillance, you identify why maternal death happens, and then you respond to it by identifying and executing appropriate solutions for it. That was the key word for bringing down maternal mortality. We have to consider the realities in our state when we think about solutions. For example, 70% of deliveries take place in the private sector, where the patients have to spend from their pockets for the care. Unlike, for example, UK, where the NHS provides for anything and everything. We have to consider the political interference and the political philosophy of the different political parties. Whenever possible, put down the medical profession, put down the doctors. That is the attitude of some of those leaders. And also we have to consider the rapid turnover of staff, doctors and nurses that is happening in our state, especially now the nurses who are all migrating en masse to the developed world like the UK. And we could come out with this book, Why Mothers Die, 2010 to 2020, our own observations and recommendations. What I'm going to discuss with you are the points that came out of this analysis of the last 10 years, and of course, the 10 years before that. And this is the causes of death that we analyzed up to 2019-20. And you can see that hemorrhage and hypertension, unfortunately, was leading throughout. Even though the total numbers have come down a little bit, the percentage doesn't change much. 16, 17, 17, 16, like that. Hypertension, again, numbers have come down. And recently, the percentage also has come down. But sepsis, unfortunately, the numbers are remaining high. Heart disease, amyloid embolism, pulmonary embolism, and liver disease, thankfully not all that many, but neurological causes, recent spurt in that. Suicide, a big spurt recently, and anesthesia-related deaths, which was absent for a few years, again showing its head here, and other causes like that. But the latest I can share with you is this. When we analyzed for 2021, that is from April 20 to March 21, we had only 105 deaths. And in that, again, PPH and APH together was the leading cause. Suicide took the next place. Amyloid embolism, hypertension, sepsis, all these are significant causes. But the other thing that came up was, to our surprise, heart disease taking up 10. Then the latest coming up to this December here, from April 21 to December of 21, and this is the one that has created some controversy regarding the maternal death in Kerala. 184 deaths were noted, of which 93 were of COVID. The non-COVID causes, if you look at it, the 91 of them, 17 PPH and APH. Suicide 11. And the other leading causes are, of course, AFE, hypertension, sepsis, respiratory, there's a non-COVID, and again, many other causes. So in my discussion today, what I am trying to do is take you through some of these observations. Hemorrhage still the leading cause. Why is that? The failure of inability to arrest the bleeding as soon as it is noticed is the reason why hemorrhage, an avoidable cause, still taking the leading position in maternal mortality statistics. Every minute counts. There is no golden 1 or 2 hours to save the patient. That dictum that we used to teach our undergraduates and postgraduates, that golden 2 hours, no more applicable. Every laboring woman should have an IV line. WHO says otherwise, but we feel that every laboring woman should have an IV line. And in every case, vaginal delivery as well as cesarean, active management of third stage of labor should be followed. The types of hemorrhage that we noticed, atonic, of course, was the leading, but abruption was there, traumatic was there, and placenta accreta spectrum was there. So what we suggested was, we should have a paradigm shift in our approach to PPH. What is that shift? We came out with a flow chart. Whenever we have a woman preparing for vaginal delivery or cesarean for that matter, vaginal delivery, we put a mat, absorbent mat under the buttocks, continue to conduct the delivery, fetal delivery happens, then active management of third stage of labor is instituted for every case. If at that point there is excess bleeding, that is before the placenta has separated, that may be most likely traumatic, deal with it like that. But if there is no excess bleeding at that point, and you had the placental delivery, if there is excess bleeding, and if it is found to be maybe 500 ml or more, assume it as likely PPH, immediately the person on the spot call for help, but applies bimanual compression of the uterus. Keeping the fingers in the bimanual compression position, she or he asks for 2 things. Give additional oxytocin drugs, AMTSL already given, and take the transvaginal uterine artery clamp or suction cannula. With the drug alone, if hemostasis is achieved, you withdraw your hand and wait for a while. She can be shifted to 4th stage after the usual mandatory observation. But if the bleeding is continuing after the drug, immediately apply the clamp, TVUSC, or the suction cannula. And with that, if the bleeding stops, fine. If the bleeding doesn't stop, check whether the clamp or the cannula is in the right position and the right way. If not, reapply it. And if the bleeding stops, fine, take care for further observation. But if the bleeding doesn't stop, then you go for additional measures like condom tamponade or Bakri balloon or suction cannula or whatever it is additional. But if the bleeding has stopped, you continue to observe her, repair the episiotomy if it is there, and shift her to fourth stage for another mandatory 2 hours of observation of fourth stage, and that avoids PPH. So if PPH has occurred, we will tackle it like this. If PPH hasn't, could be immediately arrested with bleeding, then she goes safe. This is the approach that we are promoting. And in this, you would have noticed active management of third stage of labor is compulsory. What is active management? I'm not going to elaborate. I hope all of you know that the most important component there is the IV oxytocin. We have to consider carbetocin, which everybody in other centers say that it makes such a wonderful effect, prevents PPH. Unfortunately, what has happened is the government of India entered into an agreement with the manufacturer to supply at the very cheap rate of 27 rupees per ampule for the government sector. I don't think we have got it in the government sector here, I don't know. But the private sector is charged about 400 rupees per vial, same dose. We should make representations to make it more uniform and accessible. But anyway, carbetocin may make a difference because we have our concerns that the oxytocin that we get may not be of appropriate strength due to storage problems. Now, if the bleeding has to be controlled, transvaginal uterine artery clamp, I'm not going to go elaborate on that, or the suction cannula. These are the first aids that we have found to stop the bleeding. And in the last 5 years, we did not have any patient after vaginal delivery to be taken to the theater for a laparotomy and control the bleeding once we started to use the suction cannula, the clamp, or later the suction cannula, sometimes combining both of them. Additional drugs, any or all of the following may be used, like methergine, F2 alpha, tranexamic acid, and misoprostol. I'm not going to elaborate on that. The suction cannula and the TUS, every delivery point should have adequate number of sets. I would say up to 500 deliveries per year, you should have at least 1 set. More than that, you should have at least 2 sets. If you have more than 3,000 to 4,000 deliveries, maybe 4 sets. Readily available. In case you need it, only open a tray and you have the set ready, either the cannula to be inserted or the retractase to open the vagina and the clamp to be applied. And I have requested the government to consider supplying this to all delivery points. My suggestion is that even private delivery points should be supplied. The cost is not that much. If you don't supply and the patient ends up with PPH, finally it is going to end up with the government hospital. It is going to end up with a maternal death, which adds to our problem. So at least either persuade or compel the private centers to have these devices, or the government should provide it free. That is my suggestion. And it is for us, the obstetric community, to see that we take full advantage of this and prevent the postpartum hemorrhage as a curse for us. Placenta accreta spectrum used to take 4, 5, 6 mothers every year from us. Fortunately for us, it has come down in number, but still it is a major cause of morbidity. We already have a way of tackling it without much morbidity, and that is the aorta clamp or the common iliac artery clamp. With its use, we could transfer or convert almost sure maternal deaths on the table to sometimes morbidity with bladder injury, excess blood supply, but life is saved. So my suggestion again to the government was, government should come out with a plan to select and certify centers which are authorized to manage placenta accreta spectrum, as is done in the developed world. Not every center which has the ability to do a cesarean should be authorized to tackle a placenta accreta spectrum. You should have an experienced surgically skilled obstetrician, one or more. You should have the backup of a urologist, if necessary, an oncosurgeon or a vascular surgeon. From the blood bank side, you should have adequate blood. Even if you have all these clamps, you may need more blood. You should have the facilities for massive blood transfusion. If possible, especially in percreta cases, you should have a cell salvage system. But more than anything, experience of the people who handle it. Then only we will have the ability to tackle placenta accreta spectrum without that leading to a maternal death. Hypertension. We found that, unfortunately, hypertension, numbers of deaths due to hypertension has come down, but still it is a significant contributor to maternal death. And we already had worked out through quality standards how to tackle it. We said that we have to pick up preeclampsia by regularly and routinely insisting that every woman coming for antenatal care, whether in the field or in the hospital, should have an appropriate blood pressure monitoring. Every woman should have urine protein checked once in the first and second trimester and once at every visit from 34 weeks. Once you identify preeclampsia, check whether it is already a HELP syndrome. You make sure that you appropriately deliver them. All these are implemented. Government has supplied magnesium sulfate to all the government points. Labetalol intravenous is available to control the bleeding. So we could bring down the number of deaths, but still a lot more to go. So we would suggest that government should make alpha-methyl dopa available. The only problem with that drug, I don't agree with that. It leads to liver problems and depression and all that. The only problem with that drug is that it is cheap. The alternative that people claim for that, labetalol, has got beta blocker effect, and it can lead to IUGR. So I would say alpha-methyl dopa should be brought back as the first line. Magnesium sulfate should be the preferred anticonvulsant. We should control the hypertension aggressively using labetalol. And postpartum BP should be monitored at least for 10 days in those who are preeclampsia. This is the bugbear for us. Suicide. You see the number of deaths due to suicide? The number of deaths due to suicide has gone up so much. In 1920, 19 maternal deaths due to suicide. Out of only about 180 deaths, 19 due to suicide. Total of 79 maternal deaths. And if you look at the recent figures also, 10, 11 maternal deaths due to suicide. Obstetricians alone cannot do anything much on that. We have to be there in the forefront, but alone we cannot. A multi-departmental cooperation and initiative is required for this, and so government should take the lead in bringing together the various departments, Department of Women and Children's Welfare, Department of Social Justice, Department of Children for the looking after the welfare of other social aspects. All these have to come together to plan, because the maternal death due to suicide is not due to pre-existing mental disorders. Most of these are social factors leading to maternal death, suicide. The mobile phone culture has a lot to do with that. And we have to look at it in a very broad sense, then only we can tackle that. Sepsis. Our observation regarding sepsis was unfortunately, again, a major contributor. 96 total deaths in these 9 years. And we should take steps to stop misuse of antibiotics so that resistant strains will be less. Whatever antibiotics we give will be effective. And antibiotic stewardship should be promoted in every hospital. And there should be restriction on over-the-counter dispensing of antibiotics. This is the only way to tackle the sepsis as a major problem. Amniotic fluid embolism. Unfortunately, this catastrophic event can happen in any labor unexpectedly. And as you can see here, we had in these 9 years, 58 deaths due to amniotic fluid embolism. Many more would have been included, but we weed out and then say only those which fit into our criteria we include as amniotic fluid embolism. And this is an area where we have to work more. The one thing that KFOG has been impressed was almost always there is a history of hyperstimulation prior to that. So we have in our induction protocol insisted that hyperstimulation should be avoided. We have also told all practitioners to avoid the use of drugs like epidosin and rotavirin late in labor. And in case unexpectedly amniotic fluid embolism occurs, there should be a team capable of resuscitation. And that is why we promoted obstetric rapid response team. Not only doctors, but nurses also to be trained and under the roof in every delivery center, small or big, there should be at least one person who is trained in that, who will come and help to resuscitate that patient who has thrown up fits or gone to collapse or gone to cardiac arrest as a result of amniotic fluid embolism. So we have to think about promoting this further. So all these bring out one point. Training and retraining is the way forward. Train the doctors and nurses and nursing assistants also. And we should have a cadre of labor room nurses or midwives. They should feel dignity in saying that they are midwives. All along, midwives in our country are considered one step below the nurses. BSc nurse, MSc nurse, BSc nurse, GNM, then the midwife. In fact, in the West, if you go, nurse midwife is the top. We should bring back prestige to the position of the nurse midwife. They should be given more authority to do things. Administration of oxytocin agents, and also to apply the clamp, transvaginal urinary clamp, and the suction cannula. Because in many of the centers where delivery takes place, at the time of delivery, it may be only the nurse there. Doctor will come later to suture the episiotomy or do other things. So the nurses have to be empowered. EMOCALs, Emergency Obstetric Care and Life Support, the training program that we started years ago and still being continued, has to be revamped. Because of the COVID, we had to stop it, but we have restarted it now. And recertification of EMOCALs for every practicing obstetrician should be mandatory, and it can happen only if the government puts its mind to it. So our aim is to have this 2-day program. We have EMOCALs for doctors, EMOCALs for nurses. Doctors, 2-day program, nurses, 1-day program. That will have an overlap with the obstetric rapid response team training. Rapid response doesn't look into conditions like induction of labor, how to do cesarean safely and all that. That will be covered in the EMOCALs. Obstetric rapid response is only to resuscitate a collapsed patient and the things related to that. Whereas EMOCALs will have wider reach. So both these have to be there. And the good thing is, even during these COVID days, we have restarted the ORRT online. And in fact, yesterday we had a session covering the 3 districts of Ernakulam, Kottayam, and Idukki. 12th of next month, February, we have the next session. And in fact, Prakash, I have offered to share the link with Bangalore Society for that, because anyway, it's going to be online. And you can see what we mean by ORRT, because there was discussion on ORRT in the Bangalore Society webinar, which I was participating this morning. Nurses should be authorized to use the TUAC as well as the suction cannula. That's the important point I want to convey to you. MD NMSR, about 5 years ago we started. It was welcomed like anything by the peripheral obstetricians. This was a time for information sharing to the periphery. It was a learning experience where the seniors and the junior peripheral obstetricians would come together, discuss their problems, share the experience of maternal deaths as well as near miss in the district. It was a very good learning experience. We have to revamp it. But more than anything, what has given returns is the regular review meeting with the health secretary used to call for about before the COVID times. Hopefully, we have restarted it. We had one this week, and hopefully we will continue to have regular meeting. That is what the health secretary promised. But that was the one thing that used to have the communication line on from the periphery to the health secretary or to the minister. And the other thing is, sadly, our own government, the ministry, do not seem to be very appreciative of what we are doing. Achieving that target of 28 maternal MMR for our state, I don't think there was any acknowledgement for that. But we are not doing it for getting somebody else's acknowledgement. We do it primarily because we feel it is our bounden duty to do that. And that's what we do. And these are a few thoughts which I had coming out of the CRMD. Thank you very much, Venu, Ajit, Pesi, and all of you for this opportunity to share with you